All right, guitar sexies, let's get into this bad boy. Obviously, I get asked a million questions about picking. So we're going to cover today's lesson, if you will, about the picking and whatnot. We're just going to go through some basic information, of course, and I'm going to show you some tips and tricks and whatnot to get to like, whatever, the mindless shred you saw at the beginning in the intro there. Remember, don't do anything to like, I did it excessively there just because, people are like, ooh, whatever. But remember, it's more important to have control and taste and stuff like that. And then just gradually work on getting the chops faster and faster and faster until you can play them fast but comfortably. So they make sense, okay? Don't just play fast for the sake of playing fast because it's kind of silly. So, having said that, and honestly, do you really think you're going to top the Racer X days and that whole shrapnel stuff? No. So, again, it's futile. So instead of doing that, try to put another take on it. And the thing here is obviously the takeaway is just the various techniques. That way you can change up your practice sessions and make them more engaging so you actually get real learning out of it. People just go on autopilot. They do the same thing again and again and again and again. And then they wonder why they're not getting better. I saw one today, and listen, there's just no offense. I love you guys, all of you, but you need to understand this. Doing this kind of spider stuff, or even in sequences, is, it's fine and dandy for the first couple years when you're just sort of developing the bare minimum level of sort of technique and whatnot. But once you get to a certain level, that should instantly be moved over to just scales, right? Where you're sort of moving up the one scale, down the next, and then up the next. Between the scales. Locrian there, right? Ionian, Dorian here. That's Dorian again. Oh, Phrygian. There's Lydian. Oh, Mixolydian. Oh, Aeolian. Okay, so that is way more important than actually just mindlessly going over those exercises where you're not going to, if you want to get a difference of, change the note sequence or there's obviously an inexhaustible limit there, or no limit, I should say. Inexhaustible means no limit, Jesse. I got into like this humongous edible muffin, and it just wrecked me all day yesterday. So you'll have to forgive me because I'm just coming back to normal. So that was a whoops moment, but it was awesome too. I mean, don't get me wrong. Vacation. So, don't shoot the messenger. But still, okay, so that's more important than just going through this ritual of playing something. And this is the whole essence behind sort of switching up the techniques with respect to the picking. Too many people get hyper-focused on alternate picking or economy picking or hammer-ons and pull-offs and whatnot, and they don't try to unify those 3 branches or 4 or 5 branches. Sweeping is in there, obviously. Inside picking's another one. So all these branches to sort of one central point so that you can just execute these techniques at will when necessary. When you're feeling, you're like, oh, this is my Petrucci moment. I'm going to unleash this flurry of pick dust and just destroy the audience with this insane sort of run of 30-second notes. Rather than be like, man, I wish I had the chops and the confidence to actually do that. Right? Starts up here. The war in the battle is won up here first before it ever gets to the hands. So once you organize the troops and you send down the orders, all of a sudden these things start doing what it is exactly that you want if you ramp it up slowly so that you can sort of practice it with confidence, and you keep sort of rearranging your practice sessions so they're always fresh and interesting. Then guess what? You will get much better at the instrument incredibly fast, because that is truly the trick. Now listen, you can't go shotgun all over the place, be like studying jazz music one day and then jump into country. I mean, one day you're working on arpeggios, next day you're working on your scales, but it's all relative. If you're working on a couple positions, the major scale, the minor scale, the Mixolydian mode, the Aeolian, whatever, then you're going to sort of explore what you're doing there, working on the pentatonic scale. Well, if that's the case, you're doing the pentatonic scale and you're starting to factor in some of these major scales, right? So that's what I mean by diversifying your practice sessions so that you maximize your learning experience. Okay, so let's get into these picking exercises. They're not exercises, just examples, so to speak here. Obviously, the first one here we're just going to use the minor pentatonic here, A minor. Why not? Basically C major, right? And remember, with respect to this A minor, we have this Aeolian mode as the 3 notes per string stuff. We also have the classical method. Remember to train your ear to hear that sequence of notes, right? Then you've got the chord itself, right? You've got this arpeggio. Also this minor 7. Right, so there's all these things that sort of live in the Aeolian position, including the minor pentatonic, right? So always keep that in your mind, the superimposition idea where there's multiple things happening at this position at the same time, and you're just like, I want to use the blues scale, the minor pentatonic. I want to go into an arpeggio. Well, that's this one. Which one? Minor 7 flat 5, diminished, the minor 7, the straight up triad, an inversion, which would be a first inversion major here. Oops. Pretty interesting. Right, so there's that sort of transition. So again, you're getting the idea here that just seeing things in a static light, very bad. And that includes varying the technique. Always hammer-ons and pull-offs, always alternate picking, always this, always economy picking, blah, blah, blah. So change them up. First one is obviously the free stroke, just one strike. Notice how I kind of hit it. I'm not really trying to control the pick or anything. I just want to keep it close to the strings so that I can do that, controlling the string noise, of course. That's one thing everybody gets wrong with this. It's not just about going fast, it's about controlling the string noise. So people can hear what you're actually playing there. And then of course there's the next level where I'm going to use the idea of sweeping and just drop the pick. See that? There's a free stroke. And here's when I use the picking sort of like idea of sweeping, sorry. That can be quite nice when you're doing these sort of like sequences, because you get to keep track of what you're doing. You go quite fast. Right, so great exercises there. So that's just the individual strikes. Of course, I took it to the extreme there at the end. But again, it's just letting the pick fall between the next one. It's like I was playing this straight up arpeggio like this. Instead of having, obviously, 2 strikes on the lowest string and the highest string to sort of turn it around and start it in the first place, I'm just doing the one and letting the pick drop between each string so I get to the next one. I guess you could say that's almost a combination of that economy style, if you will, and then also using the free stroke when you start getting into those sequences. It feels more like a free stroke to me, but I guess you could practice it the other way. But path of least resistance, people. Do not practice something just because you're like, oh, this will make me better because I'm just torturing myself. Just get it done. Get out of there, right? Next step is obviously 2 strikes, 2 picks. Again, using the free stroke idea there, right? Where it's just... I got the 3-note system, of course. right? And this is important because you're doing the down, up, down, but then the next one is going to be starting with an upstroke. So if you start with a downstroke, the next string will be upstroke, and vice versa for when you do it the other way around. But essentially why that's important, it's down, up, down, up, down, up. That's what you're concentrating up. The first stroke is this down, then it's the up, then it's the down, then it's the up, then it's the down, and then it's the up. If you start thinking in terms of that instead of down, up, down, up, down, up, like that, you'll just get confused and just lose track, and you'll be like, it doesn't work very well. But if you're like down, up, as each string passes by, well, now all of a sudden you can actually keep track of it and furthermore anticipate the strike, whether it's going to be a down or an up, so you don't lose track of where you are in the sequence either, because you're like, oh, I know the next one's going to be a downstroke or an upstroke. This is integral to getting clean alternate picking technique, which honestly is very, 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 very difficult. Okay, there's so many things going on there, controlling the pick, how much pressure it is, letting the pick bounce back and forth against the string instead of like trying to do it all in the wrist. You're actually, again, using the string as some sort of resistance measurement to be able to control the speed of the pick going by it so that you can keep it nice and tight and even. At the higher speeds, it's very difficult to keep it even for a long period of time. You might be able to sputter in and out of the tempo, basically, as it is, but to keep it even for an extended period of time is quite difficult. So keep that in mind, right? So there's the two techniques there. Then I have like a combination of those two where I basically have 2 notes on some strings, and such as the classical method, and 3 notes on other strings, right? So again, in this case, the low E, the B, and the high E all have just 2 notes, right? This one here to start, then it's just your standard 3 notes per string stuff. 2 notes there and 2 notes there, right? So that's a sort of hybridization of the idea of just doing this minor pentatonic and then the 3 notes per string stuff, right? And I put it together and I get this little bad boy. And that's going to come in handy later on for when you're doing sort of like dissimilar string sets, or you want to move vertically and you're basing it on another string, blah, 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 whatever. I'll leave it up to you. So that's definitely going to be in there. The other one is of course, you're starting to get into this economy idea. So I'm going to do it across 2 strings. You're just doing that down, down, up, right? So I'm starting with an upstroke, and then I'm doing 2 downs and then 2 ups, right? So 2 downs, 2 ups, 2 ups, 2 downs. We did a lick not too long ago, maybe 2 or 3 lessons ago, where I was showing this here with the pentatonic, right? Which is like a Zach Wild thing, right? Of course, it's great practice, again, for this economy picking and controlling. The idea is, again, pushing and pulling the pick past the strings. I'm not actually, if you notice my pick in my hand, it's not moving back and forth like you would see a normal picking when I'm going. See that, where I'm doing an actual thing and my wrist is firm here. Locked into place, if you will. Moving down again. Right, so that's going to be an integral technique. Again, if you're just starting it slowly, you can kind of work up the speed, but again, it's hard, man. It's very hard. It gets easier the ones you up, but these low strings are evil because of the way you have to roll the pick over there. You got to work up to it a bit. Especially when you have different sequences of fingers there, 1, 4, 1, 3, ouch, right? So obviously that's going to be a super useful technique. Start in the highest position, either with the highest string or going up again. And honestly, I would start down here where you can just do 1 and 3, which are going to be your strongest fingers to get used to this idea. So do up, down, down. Slowly, right? And relaxing your hand until you can use the strings. It's like, okay, I'm getting past the 2 of them, and then you can go faster. So on and so forth. Right, so that covers the 2 strike stuff, and then once you get past there, what you get is like the in-between, which is going to be the economy picking, right? So then what you have is this idea where you're doing, moving to the next adjacent string with a downstroke. Right, so I have this Down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. Right, the classic gambale. Right, which can be very useful for those sequences there, which is again a combination of the economy picking and alternate picking put together. And you could almost say some hammer-ons and pull-offs and thrown in there when the strings get a little dicey and it gets weird, so you can just hammer on instead of just actually trying to pick. Because honestly, at the higher speeds, nobody can tell anyways for the most part. So those are going to be very, very important. Now, the thing here is to combine these techniques together, so to speak. Okay? So let's say I'm starting here in this A minor. And I did some economy there, and then I'm going to do some alternate picking. Where am I? Aeolian, right? And moving up to Locrian here. Now look at these little sequences here where you kind of alternate on one string when you're practicing, right? Where you're going to go. Oops, sorry. Let's start in the right place. My bad. Where I'm sort of cycling and then going between the next string, right? Some people will do this kind of thing, which is good too, obviously moving up. But you want to just sit on one string, maybe go slower, speed it up. That can be incredibly useful because it helps you extend out these practice sessions where you get more of the sense of stamina necessary, right? Once you go faster. Now again, you're relaxing. Notice how I can just bring it right back down to nothing and then start going. Of course, you want to start learning to speed up. Now, not really flexing my wrist. I'm using the pick to essentially gauge how much pressure I'm using on the string here and moving my fingers, obviously. Now, I'm not doing a great job here, obviously, because I can't talk and do it at the same time, and this microphone makes it difficult, too, because I have to stand weird, or else I sound like I'm 6 miles away. So, enough whining. The big reveal here, obviously, is that speed is a product of familiarity. I started off with... Now here's another one. See, notice I'm creating a pattern where I'm cycling and moving up the fretboard. And then I started speeding it up. Now notice I'm not using more of my wrist. I'm using more of the feeling of the pick moving past the strings to, again, apply a slightly more tension on my finger and thumb, really, to create the pressure necessary to keep the pick even, just moving past this string like this. I don't do more of this and throw my wrist harder or my arm harder. I just use the string and the pick moving by it as the sort of feedback loop, if you will, to gauge, oh, if I put a little bit more pressure here, like a little bit, because if you put too much pressure, you're actually going to slow yourself down, then I can go a bit faster, but keep it controlled, right? So I can kind of go like from this slower speed to going faster. Now listen, of course, my first finger's planted here. I'm not doing the freeing I'm not doing the freeing one like that. I don't do that, okay? In this case, then you'd move the plant like that. When I want to cycle on one, I want to keep the plant, right? And then I want to reposition my fingers like you can see me do there. Again, controlling the pick. Right, so that's going to be the sort of way forward, is instead of thinking, oh, I need to throw my wrist harder, I need to tense up more, I need to flex my forearm as more shoulder action in there. No, all not very true. It may depend a little bit on how you play the guitar, physically speaking, sure, I'll give you that, but most of it should be just control, based around the idea of feedback of how the pick feels moving across the strings. It's the same exact principle for when I'm doing this two-string action. I'm feeling how much pressure it takes for me to move through the strings. It's the same thing here, right? because I can move between them now, right? Now, the last but not least is, of course, some muting stuff here. Let's talk about that. The thing with muting is again, once you sort of master more of the speed idea, and it just takes a long time and a lot of practice, so don't let it sort of eat at you if you're not getting great at it and it's been a while. It just takes a very long time to develop. And again, it's mindset. It's not your technique. It's the limitations your technique is imposing upon you due to bad technique. Because you haven't really sat down and been like, I haven't really sort of really looked at what I was doing and was like, oh, am I doing this properly or whatever else it is and stuff like that. A big one is if you start an alternate picking run just from scratch, should you start with an upstroke or a downstroke? Well, it really depends on the technique. But again, you can kind of see if you do it with an upstroke, it actually makes it a little easier because moving to the adjacent string next with the downstroke is a little bit more efficient than moving to it with an upstroke in most cases. At least in my experience. So it's stuff like that. Oh, really? Just the idea of just how you start the run could be like the difference between being really, really successful and clean and not very clean at all. And it kind of sounding like a mess. Wow. One thing at the very beginning, it's as simple as that, right? So as far as the muting thing is concerned, once you start getting a regular consistency, right? It's about how much pressure you're actually applying in this tiny little region here at the very back where the pick is. I'm only moving about maybe half an inch. Now you have to rearrange your picking hand a little bit so it becomes flatter to the strings. Now if you choke it off too much, what do you think is going to happen? You're just going to get nothing. And there's more of an issue there as far as maybe some of the notes fretting out completely, which isn't so great either. So instead of worrying about too much muting, instead try to concentrate on just enough muting to control the string such that it doesn't sound like it's just wide open when you're doing this stuff, right? The classic Van Halen, right? You can sort of got this. Now listen, I only like to really mute, so to speak, on the lower strings more so than the upper ones, because I find, unless you're doing like a Nuno or a couple other things where it's more of a percussive thing, then I guess, sure, it's more of an effect in your solo, but ultimately it sounds more effective and it sort of cuts through the mix and in a live situation when you're doing it on the lowest strings here, right? You'll notice too that I also do a lot of this climbing up a major scale on one string, right, before I transfer. So another sort of like great example of sort of like understanding how the scales themselves fit together in terms of the 3 notes per string stuff, and then eventually you don't need them anymore because it's permanently burned into your brain, this sequence of notes in every sort of conceivable variation, right? My brain already knows. I don't even care what key it is. Let's move the key. Same results. Oh my God, 24 frets, boys. You know how I'm doing it with 24. Carrot. I can't do the dance, forget it. I'm not even really a big Bruno Mars fan. So, I imagine that'll keep you busy. I'm such a jerk. Let's quickly recap. First is the free stroke, just one strike, right? So now I'm just going to go out there and say 90% of you can already do that. So you need to instantly start working on the sweeping idea where you're just controlling the pick, falling between the strings. This will be good for arpeggios later on. It'll also be good for the inside picking stuff, which is going to be very, very tricky for you to get a handle on. Trust me. So again, you're sort of letting the pick fall between. Again, notice how I change there. I skip over that string. Down, down, down. That's a down, then, and of course I'm switching around. So great way to practice that, obviously the 2 strikes, starting with the pentatonics, right, then moving into, say, the classical method, and then getting into 3 notes per string. Right, so that's going to be essential. And of course, there's other things you can do there once you start getting into it. Obviously, it would help if you sort of maybe ascended using the minor pentatonic, or sorry, using the Aeolian mode, and then came back down. Using hammer-ons and pull-offs. I know I sort of cheated there, I'm sorry. I'm getting sidetracked, but that's another good way of sort of combining the alternate picking, again, changing up your practice session as we spoke about earlier, so that you're like combining now 2 things, the alternate picking and sort of like some other technique. Maybe it was sweeping and alternate picking, right? You went again. Right, so that's another good way of looking at it, just combining multiple techniques together, right? Of course, you've got the 3 notes per string stuff, which we talked about. So what I would do is, instead of doing a lot of alternate picking with that, obviously you're going to get your belly full with just the pentatonics. Don't forget to add in those extra chromatic notes, so you can get 3 notes, right? You don't have to play the modes. And then basically start using the economy picking, right? So on and so forth, right? So that's another great way of sort of doing it. Of course, just combining the 2 together, maybe doing the alternate picking, or sorry, economy picking up to the economy picking, or into the, nice. You see, that's why I should stay away from that bad boy before I do these videos, because I'm just like, see ya! Flying high again, of course. So, right, let's try this again one more time. I essentially start with the economy picking, but then move into the alternate picking. Again. So another one that, of course, was the Aeolian mode here, right? That's Locrian into the major scale to finish the loop. Getting into your alternate picking and then muting. It's going to be a little bit more tricky. I'm not doing a great job here. But so on and so forth, you're going to get into that kind of stuff. And of course, just changing up the rhythm on a regular basis, just sort of starting slow, moving back down. Of course, it's going to sound much better with a backing track where you can actually sort of have some sort of reference of time. But then moving up, of course. That's tricky. You can see there's a hesitation there. That's my mind being like, I don't want you to do that. Again, keeping the actual the rhythmic volumes equal. Not my best example there, but you get the idea. You're sort of like, of course, I'm trying to push it to my level where I'm doing both techniques flawlessly all the time. That's obviously a lot more difficult, and I'm still working on it after all these years, but it's getting closer. But you're starting to see how the convergence idea happens. You start to just move this basic alternate picking idea, right, into something that's going to be, you know, more sort of encompassing. Which is, of course, using all the techniques there. It's alternate picking, that's two strings, it's economy picking, the whole 9 yards to get the sweep in. Again, very cool. Whatever, it's good enough for right now. So, start working them together. Starting with single strikes and double strikes. Moving into 2 into 3, right? So you move up on the pentatonic, maybe into a scale. That kind of an idea. And then maybe, again, do all 3 where you get a sweep in. 3 notes. To 2. And there you go, you complete the whole loop, right? So I'm pretty sure that'll keep you busy until Sunday. You know, if you thought I did a good job, smash the like button. If you want to subscribe, well, welcome. We'd love to have you on board. If you have any questions, obviously, comment section is about as lively as, you know, downtown San Francisco. Oh, whoops. Getting banned off YouTube for that one. Thanks for hanging out. Really appreciate you people. Thank you. Have a great day and see ya in the next one.